in the background there. So again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Try to go through this quickly. Excited to see so many people logging on. Hopefully got to go back through and rewatch last week's segment where we started kind of getting into about how the trail hand affects the backswing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that this week. In particular, the plane. Again, I think the one thing that always amazes me to when I start talking to students is they don't have an understanding of what the swing plane is, why it's important, where things are located. And when we start looking at how we're trying to hit a golf ball, if I don't know where I'm going and I don't know how to get there, we're just going to be lost. So going through and trying to figure out what our swing plane is, why is it important? Again, the golf ball somewhere on the swing plane. So we're going to go through and have some examples and different drills to do to work on the backswing. So last week was 3 to get ready. We got the 12 sections of the stroke. Most teachers, when they refer to positions in the golf swing, you'll hear them say P1, P2, P3. I believe it was Matt Grady that really created that, who is also a Golf Machine guy. Homer had 12 sections to the stroke because those 3 had to do with the address position. So just going to recap that real quick again, like how do we start to create a consistent golf swing? We have to start with being consistent into our routine. So that has to do with what you're doing every single time. And it's not always just the mental part of it. We want to think and project what we want to do positively, but that does not mean that we are going to always have that happen. But when we go through, I think one of my favorite videos I show people is Tiger Woods doing a presentation. And he says, my routine's the same on the first hole to the 72nd hole of a major. And he goes and plays in these pro-ams, and the amateurs have a different routine every single shot on the first hole. So again, there is some truth to how we start to build this consistency and being able to play good golf. It does start with before we're even pulling the trigger. Setting our grip, again, last week, do it again real quick for those who missed it. I always like to do this on a golf glove. But I would take my lead hand. And again, we got our anatomical snuff box up here in the wrist. And I'm going to put a dot right in the middle of the webbing of my hand. That dot wants to go down the center of the club. The worst place that we can put our thumb is down the middle. We want that dot to be slightly down. So to do that, I'm going to turn and bend my lead hand slightly, put my heel pad on there first, then my thumb pad, close the hand up. That's how we're going to get that tore neutral grip. So you can see it has a little bend at address. My trail hand is flat, and then at impact, we're going to get to that part, but that they reverse themselves. Again, Hogan talked about how the lead wrist at impact, the bone is going towards the target. There were some things that were happening there, but again, he was a pretty smart guy. He knew what was going on. Going in again, we talked about testing your trail hand. A couple different ways to do that. We were doing our trail hand, just like pitch shot swing. And you can kind of see like how quickly my club face wants to close because I'm more of a cover golfer. If I have a more covered grip, that doesn't want to happen as much. The club face stays a lot more square. I don't have to fight that and steer that. And then connecting the hands. Again, I'm not a big advocate of how you interlock or overlap or any of that. I leave that really up to the player. So again, it's not preference. It's going to be more comfort. Sometimes I do find that if you need to get your trail hand a little bit more on top, it is a lot easier to do that if I do not interlock them. Usually that's what I had to change about 15 years ago. Then flying wedges, the alignments of the arms. We're going to get a little bit more into that today because we're going to start talking about the swing plane and how the trail arms, the right forearm especially, is very impactful on that. So let's get started. Pull up the thing here. So again, so we got 3 to get ready, 3 to get up. So what does that mean? Okay, well, we got our startup, our backstroke, and our top. And those are our 3 key things that we're going to talk about tonight, breaking it down into segments. And again, it's really important. One of my favorite books that I have read as a teacher is The Talent Code by Dan Coyle. And one of the examples he provides in these talent pockets that he found was up in New York City. And he talked about chunking. It was an orchestra camp, and they took 2 different groups and they segmented them. One learned the music from the very beginning to the end, and the other, they took the same music, broke it into pieces, and they learned it faster and played it better. Because if you think about when you learn a song, you learn it from the beginning to the end. If you mess up, you start over. They had all these different segments. So they were learning a lot more, a lot faster. So that's what we want to do with golf. We want to break it into pieces. And usually we're trying to go all the way into the whole entire full swing. So we're going to lead with some really good drills today. To take out to the range tomorrow. If you got a net to do, it's a great drill to work into the net to train the hands and start training the plane and how we're going to work and sequence the swing. Again, we're going to talk about how the difference in your body type is going to influence on all that. But the goal is to try to create a repeatable motion so that under pressure that we can go out and we can play good golf. Again, I think the one thing that's going to impact us the most is always going to be our balance with the uneven lies. It's the hard part about going from the range to the course. But let's get started here. So startup. So again, kind of going through and talking about the differences in the grip types in BioSwing Dynamics. Mike Adams and EA Tischler have been really impactful on my understanding of how the body really influences how the club wants to move and how we want to move. I do find it that, again, like Mike and EA refer to it as a horizontal set. They call it a hinge, but if for me as a golf machiner, my shoulder hinges, my wrist does not hinge. But in this takeaway, we're going to be more of kind of see how my right hand is kind of just bending this back. I tend to find a lot of people that are side unders, they like to have like this little waggle here. That might be like a little cue that might be what you need to be doing. Again, that's you setting the club. I find, we're going to talk about some errors that happen, but sometimes if we don't load the club at the right time, it starts to influence what's going on at the top. In the startup for a side under, we do find that the lower body tends to be a little bit more delayed. If I turn my hips with that early wrist set, the club gets way in underneath the plane. We're going to talk a little bit more about the plane too. And because of that real load, I'm going to sit into my trail knee a little bit more. And the thing that I'm always usually watching, again, just talking about the swing playing, is I'm trying to get that club to be right on that orange stick, parallel to my toe line. So it's going to be your side under. Got our side on. Find it more shoulders. Again, this is your traditional, I think, more one-piece takeaway is how I would kind of describe this. It's going to be more of a torso, kind of creating that separation between my upper body and lower body. The hips are going to start to turn a little bit sooner. They have the least amount of delay next to upper core or cover. And again, going into because my hips are turning a little bit more, usually we see a little less knee flex in that trail leg. And BioSwing Dynamic talks about the diagonal hinge. In the beginning, I really didn't understand when they referenced that, what they were referring to. So I'm going to kind of try to explain it and how I see it as a golf machiner. When I see my hand here, I take my trail hand. If I just take my trail hand and go this way, we call that bend. Okay, so this is called arch. That's called bend. Now, depending on how my hand is on the golf club, if I take my hand and put it slightly under and I just bend it, that makes the club appear to hinge horizontally. If I take my hand more side on, our traditional grip, and I just take my right hand and bend it, the club kind of seems to effectively hinge in, like, basically cocking. I call it loading because, again, my shoulder is hinging. When we get into short game, we'll learn more about the hinge. That's going in more on the diagonal. Now, if I go to mine cover, again, this would be more of kind of like a Matthew Wolf feel. It's more of a vertical set. You can see how much more outside the hands are. The club shaft gets to be more vertical. So if you see these things in your golf swing, you're looking at your swing and you're trying to get the club to be on plane, which I was guilty of for a long time. I always felt like I had to get this butt of the golf club pointing to my target line, which is also known as our baseline. That got my shoulders really flat. So my driver was my worst club because my first move would be steep and over the top. So what happened is the more that I got my shoulders down, the more vertical the shaft appeared to be. But that matched my grip type. So that's okay. So those are things that we're going to start to see when we start to look at the startup. Again, as a cover, again, my takeaway, I always felt that it was wrong, again, because I always got told that we had to maximize our body separation and X factor stretch and really try to create this really big, huge separation of upper body, lower body. So for me, my move is my right hip is getting out of the way. Greg Norman talked about RPB, right pocket back. I tell that to students all the time. Again, a lot of my stories that I share, I've been blessed to hear from other teachers, mainly Len Blake, one of my biggest mentors, and again, makes me see things in the golf swing I never would have seen before, help me understand the golfing machine. So we have no hip delay. And because my hip is turning a lot, my trail leg tends to straighten. Now, when you do that, we got to make sure that this trail foot isn't rocking around. We got to make sure that it's staying stable. We don't want it to be moving too much. So there's one thing that I do see sometimes where we start to turn too much and we'll either start to reverse pivot or this is going to get into the foot starts to rock around. So sometimes pulling the right foot back a little bit with a closed stance, like Mr. Hogan, isn't a bad thing. All right, so common startup errors. So again, we're going to use my nice jumbo club here so we can see this. When I used to think that people, when they would come back here and they would get this club toe up, I used to think that they did it on purpose. Now, some people teach that. It's not correct. We know that the club is matching my spine angle. So if it was matching my spine angle, it should be on a slight tilt. So like I got my real yellow stick tape here. So in my backswing, I'm always trying to make sure that that player has got that club face matching the spine angle in the very beginning. The tendency is when the club does get inside and the hands start to kind of turn the club open, it usually gets inside and open. It's pretty rare. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's pretty rare to be shut and inside. I personally have not seen it, but I'm not going to say it's impossible to have happen. So the other part is, again, rocking back and drifting off the golf ball. Again, Mr. Kelly would say, we don't want to sway. We don't want to bob. When we start talking about the swing plane, again, keeping my head pretty steady and centered, accurately returns the club back to the golf ball. I think that's one of the things that I always try to make sure people understand is we're not moving. We're moving, but the ball's not moving. Contact should be one of those things that we have the ability to have happen. I'm going to read this real quick. Cannot see your body, and the writing occupies. Yeah, if you turn off the one screen, so it's just one screen, Jim, you will be able to see it all, I believe. Like you can turn off the comments. I think, is that what you mean? Or if you turn it sideways, let me know if that helps. You don't want to just watch my belt. Sorry. Unfortunately, I can't. I don't see it that way. I'm seeing mine. On mine, I'm looking at it, or if I'm looking at the screen side by side, you can see both screens okay. So hopefully that helps. All right, so talking about the backstroke. So I think the one thing that I really stress to players is that there's a lot of seems as if in golf. I think one of the things that if we had to say phrases that golf instructors would love to get rid of, one would be keep your head still, because I can keep my head perfectly still and swing and move the golf ball, miss the ball. Um, Again, Mr. Nicholas said keep the head steady. But one of the things that I really find that a lot of people have a misunderstanding of is the left arm, in particular, again, the lead arm. And when I start looking at the lead arm is its main job is to just hold on. And I know that that's I've posted this before on social media and I've got ridiculed and bashed for it. No other instructor says that. Well, I hate to tell you that the left arm does not keep itself straight. The right arm is going to keep the left arm in check. So Mr. Kelly would call this extensor action. So this is why the number one pressure point is the right hand on top of the lead thumb, and there's going to be some pressure here. Now, my belief is that Mr. Hogan said he wanted these two fingers in the right hand to have pressure. I think what he was doing is he was pulling that right hand down onto that thumb to make sure that those stuck together. Again, that's the glue that holds everything together. So when we go into our backswing, if I come into my backswing here, if my right arm has too much bend, then my left arm is going to have to bend. So from here, if I kind of push out a little bit, you can see how that keeps my left arm in check. Okay, so there's just a little bit of stretch. So what's going to happen is we're going to do a couple drills to do this. Why is that important? That's going to maintain the radius of the swing. I also find that when I start getting people to have a little bit more of a feel of a stretch, it kind of fixes the face. So you can kind of see how my club face here, I got my arms bent. If I kind of push out, that actually kind of squared the face up for me. So I didn't have to consciously do that. I don't want to have to think about the club face. I really want the face to be set and square before I even swing. Kind of not possible the way full screen either. Okay. Well, if you're having that problem, more people might be having a problem. So maybe what I will do is I will stop the other stream. Let's just do that. Because there are other people will be able to see me. Then I can always re-enter that screen. Let me know if that's better. Yeah, it might be on your phone, but it's okay. I'm going to read what's on the screen anyway. So, in talking about the radius of the swing, so one of my favorite drills that Lynn taught me was we're going to take our lead hand and we're going to pinch our wrist. Okay. So notice here again, we got the Ben Hogan right arm flying wedge, right forearm flying wedge, got a little elbow bend, left arm is straight. But again, I don't have to keep it tense. So when I go here and I start to come back, I'm going to push out here. So there's just a little bit of a stretch. Okay. Now notice how I'm not pulling it so much that it pulls me off the golf ball. Pulling the setting here. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go all the way to the top. Now, what I like to do even too, and we're not going to talk about the start of the downswing today, but this is a good addition is if I kind of push out a little bit. You see how again, like that left arm is straightening before I start to go that way. So I'm kind of going both ways. I'm going shifting to my left and having a little stretch there. So that's one way. The other way, I've got to go in my bag is again, this is the equivalent of my lead arm, a rubber band. It's a rope. Okay. Now I like the idea of a rubber band over a rope because the rubber band has a little stretch. But what I like to tell people is, can this rubber band move my golf club? It cannot. Can the rubber band pull down? It cannot. Now my left shoulder can pull the rubber band in the golf club back down, but my hands are not pulling down. So I think those are two really easy drills. Again, if you have like a little workout band, I tied it so it can wrap around and kind of be secure there. Then I just use that as my left hand. I kind of have my number one pressure point, my right hand laying on that. That always works good. Good. Scroll the screen. Thank you, Corey, for trying to help here. I know you can hide the comments. I know that was one thing that we saw that last time, that the comments were blocking the screen with the presentation. So, but it's okay. Hopefully this is working and you can see me okay. So again, so we got our sensor action, making sure that we're pushing out. And then what happens is we start talking about cocking the wrists in the backswing. Again, we're using our swing plane here. So again, I got my target line. If I bring over a golf ball and trying to keep the golf club relatively on that plane. Again, for me, I am tracing a different plane. I am tracing what we call the angle of approach. So if you do have a tendency to have a steeper takeaway with the shaft, or you turn your body in the backswing, usually I'm going to go this way, club shaft's going to be here, and the club's going to cross the plane at the top. So we're going to get a little bit more into that. So go to the next one here. All right, so what is the swing plane? You kind of ask it all the time too. So the swing plane, think of it like a roof. We cut a hole and the club is just kind of swinging flat on the roof. Again, we wouldn't lift it up. It wouldn't go under as much as we would want, because the golf ball is right at the bottom of the swing plane, technically backing up the swing plane, if you will, because the low point is in front of the golf ball. So what determines the angle of the swing plane is the length of the golf club. So if I bring out a couple different lengths of clubs here, so I have my wedge versus a fairway wood. So you can see the angle of the shaft. The fairway wood is going to swing on a lot flatter swing plane versus the wedge is going to swing on a steeper swing plane. Now, this is where, Bryson approaches the game by trying to swing the same length clubs, because he's truly trying to swing on the same plane. I am a believer that the body does not necessarily change in the swing. So what I try to stress is whatever motion that we do have tends to be the same feels and motions that we're going to have from irons to driver. Now, we might prep a little different, ball position, distance from the golf ball, things like that. But most of the time, I'm trying to stress the same feels are going to be across the board. So going through and again, tracing the baseline. So a really easy drill for this. This is one that's probably been seen before. Now, again, you can't really do your full entire swing if you use the stick, because if you do, we call that another drill. That's called a rib cracker. But if I go into my backswing, again, if I come back to here, my club is parallel to that line. Now the shaft is pointing to my baseline of the plane. Then they're going to go up to the top. And it's going to be parallel here. Now, again, I would tell you, this is more here to there and there. I believe more of a side-on grip. If you're more of a strong grip player and you do set the club early, you will see the club again parallel to our target line and go up to the top. And it tends to be a little bit more laid off. For me, I like to turn back. And when I show you with the laser is going to go right inside this line, because I'm tracing the angle of approach. I'm parallel to the angle of approach at the top because I'm trying to swing down the angle of approach. I always wanted to be laid off at the top. And whenever I try to get laid off at the top, my path was a nice, easy 8 degrees into out. And I never understood why. I do believe there's some professional, really, really good golfers out there right now that don't like where the club crosses the plane. And again, I think Jack was across the plane. Larry Nelson was across the plane. There's Arnold Palmer's across the plane. There's a lot of great players across the plane. still great champions. So if you cross the plane and you hit it okay, it's fine. Now, if you slice it because you're gripping it really strong, yeah, I find that you don't want to do that. Um, yeah, I'm not going to say that there's not some outliers, but that's the tendency. So if I take my laser here, we'll put this onto my club. Now, again, because the club's so big, but this laser is going to trace the baseline. So you kind of see that on the video. And if I went all the way up to the top and then get up to here, again, the club's going to go right on plane. It's coming right back down the plane. It reverses and comes back through and on the plane. So for the same thing for that side under grip, you can see how that laser still goes right down. The one thing that, again, this is what really kind of changed my life as a cover golfer was when I realized I was allowed to, I didn't have to trace the plane. I didn't have to trace the base of the plane. I'm tracing the angle of approach. So when I turn my hip, that goes right back down. Now I am going to absolutely get crushed for this. I know I am. It's okay. I'm fine with it. I got a video camera up above my head, and every single time I watch every single cover golfer, they go back. They're parallel to the angle of approach. They cross the plane, parallel to the angle of approach. And they come right back down here, and they're angled parallel to the angle of approach, and they swing right down. Now, when they get to here, this is where it doesn't keep going. It has to go left. And Mike and EA call that a cornering action. So you really feel like your hands are going around the body. I think that's where we get in trouble with that action there. So again, going through laser, I love the laser. Again, I kind of have my own makeshift one. It's a little brighter. It has rechargeable batteries. Eyeline has another one that's really good that you can get for, has like a double laser, so you can trace that. They have like a nice green strip that you can trace in your family room. Anything that you can do, again, in my opinion, without using golf balls is great. So you go through, and again, for me, if we go through, we start looking at some errors. Again, the shaft off plane. Now, what I would say is that would be off plane. That would be too flat. Or maybe again, but you get Matthew Wolf, who is, he just hasn't turned it to plane yet. He turns it to plane at the top. So you can't really say that's not necessarily a bad thing. Ricky played some pretty good golf there too. But I do want to watch like how flat the swing gets. That does start to impact my shoulder and my spine angle. Again, poor balance in the trail foot and trail leg. Last week we talked about some just simple drills. Mr. Bob McDonald, just going through, working on our pivot. So I got my pivot of my lower body, making sure that that trail foot is staying very stable and grounded. And then I'm turning. If I feel like I have trouble with that, we can always layer our toes, or we can stagger our stance, and we can kind of do heel flare. Spine angle, I think that's probably one of the biggest ones I find with a lot of people. There's a system called Gears, which I do not own, but is really, really cool stuff. They do club fitting and 3D stuff with it. But James Lights was sharing this one time, and he said that they have like these little markers. He called them grapes that mark the pelvis and the torso. And what I kind of think of is like my belt buckle and my voice box. And I never really want my voice box to get in front of my belt buckle. So you can kind of see if I go into reverse pivot here, or if I'm like this at a dress. So even here, so we're kind of sliding the pelvis slightly towards the target. That creates my spine tilt. All right. So I got spine tilt in my takeaway. You see at the top, again, my voice box is slightly behind my belly button. Even at impact, my voice box is slightly behind my belly button. And even when I get into my finish, I'm not leaning forward. So again, when we get into the top, we can call this a reverse pivot, negative spine tilt, negative forward bend. I find that most of the time, the only option from there is to spin, come over the top, and you're in trouble. Left arm tension. So couple things, again, because that left arm, everybody's trying to keep it really tense, is it tends to pull your body off the golf ball. I think that would be number one thing. We're starting to make the arc too wide and we're drifting off the golf ball. The other thing is if I get my left arm too tense and too engaged, I do find that a lot of times people are going to pull, and that's going to be a steepener. So I always kind of tell people, if you're driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour, you're not switching passenger and driver. So whoever's the driver is going to be the driver. So that's fine if your lead arm and your left arm is the hand control. I do find that the trail arm kind of knows where the swing plane is a little bit easier. The lead arm tends to take it up a little bit more or too flat. So if you have trouble with where the swing plane is, try to use your trail arm. Again, Hogan wanted 3 trail arms, not 3 lead arms. And again, then that kind of results in our hand pass. So if my left arm is trying to go out too much, my hands are going to go out. Or if my left arm starts to push across my chest, see how that's kind of shoving my right elbow back. And that can start to get into where I go in and lift. That all gets us in trouble with that backswing. All right, so into the top. So we have our 3 positions that the club can really be at the top. So we have our laid off position. I kind of think of kind of like a baseball player, kind of where the bat would be laying kind of like back behind them. We have our crossing the plane, which is where the elbow usually starts to kind of get a little bit higher and the club starts to cross over our head. Or we have the ideal one, where the club is just parallel to our baseline. Again, I don't really tend to care too much where the club is unless, again, if you're side under, I do find that this is in trouble. You're going to usually hit it where that club is pointing. As a cover golfer, I found that actually the club crossing the plane is a massive speed window for me. I don't know if that's why Bryson does it, but I'm sure that helps him. And then I know he's turning his torso more than 90 degrees, which does affect how the club appears to be at the top as well. So that does influence some of that stuff. So getting to the top, we talked about our wingspan. So we can have our 3 positions. Again, my arm position typically is my left arm's across my turn shoulder. If your arms are a little longer, they're going to be a little higher. And if we're going to be shorter, we're going to be more across. Interesting. I just saw a post about 2 playing versus 1 playing. Again, really don't have too much of a comment on the fact other than Matt Kuchar swinging on his turn shoulder plane. So a 1 plane, again, like if I'm turning everything here, okay. But he's just where the arms are is where the track is. And Mr. Harden, really smart guy, but I don't really advocate for one or the other. I just want you to do what you're built to do. I'm talking about rotation. So if we're talking about shoulder rotation, again, the tendency is I find too many people don't turn enough. Now, whether that's, again, mobility or flexibility, again, I got 3 herniated disc, so I tend to pull my foot back. That helps me turn deeper. You can flare your toes open. That'll also help you turn a lot more. But you do have to watch when I start getting people that are out of position up here at the top. What they start to do is they start to kind of try to turn their body to fix where the club looks like it is. But this is not a body problem. This is a wrist condition problem. So you can kind of see my wrist here. If I get a little closer to the video, when I start to get here, you can kind of see how that starts to bend my wrist, and that starts to get, you can kind of see the toes of the clubs kicking down and opening. So trying to keep where the wrist is flattish, and we can have some extremes, but ideally right around flat. And you can see that club is pretty matching up to my lead hand. Saw a great video, Lee Trevino. He said, you got 3 club faces, 1, 2, 3. So love that one. It's really good. To get any other questions here. Hope everything's okay with that, Jim. Sorry for the inconvenience of it not coming out really well. Again, how does your grip affect this? So I do find that your grip type is going to influence where the club is going. So you have two of the top players in the world who have a more neutral, weaker grip, and they both don't like where the club is at the top. That kind of tends to go there when they have their hand in that position there. Um, and going through and like balance and pressure at the top. Again, just making sure my problem used to be I would drift off the golf ball before I even would go up to the top. So watching like where you are, we talked about posting. So whether you're rear post, center, or front, and again, if I get too far back, I'm usually going to have poor contact. So working on that drill, that would be another alignment stick or laser drill. Just working on when I go up to the top of the swing. If I'm trying to get laid off, you can see how this is pointing out towards in front of me, not pointing behind me. I can't even see it there. But if I'm allowed to do the crossing the plane, which again, there are some people that were allowed to. Larry Nelson doesn't have to give any of his trophies back. Neither does Jack. But I think again, when we get up to here, if you do cross the plane and you hit it good, then you're probably going to be more of a cover golfer. And if you hook it, then you probably need to fix your trail hand grip. Let's see. Again, top position. So I think one of the things I see on Instagram is everybody's talking about their wrist conditions. I would stress that make sure you have a really good lead hand grip before you start trying to arch your lead wrist. If you're one of those players that have to wear one of those bands on your forearms, you probably need to fix your grip. That would be where I would start. Because usually if my lead hand grip is weak, I'm going to have a lot more pull. I'm going to have more of a cross and a lot more of an attack angle down, hitting the ground more or trying to not hit the ground. That's where we get in trouble. Talked about the spine angle. Again, that's another error that we get into when we start looking at what happens. And then amount of turn. If I'm over rotating, usually that's going to have an effect on my feet. I always try to get people to do some practice swings barefoot to try to be a little bit more aware of where their balance is in their feet at home. And again, club shaft position, making sure we're where we need to be. And then the last part is where the arm track is. So when we start talking about in the golf swing, I think Mike and EA is where I've heard this from, but we have shallowers and steepeners, openers and closers is how they kind of describe it. So if my arm goes up and I'm not supposed to be going so vertical like myself, this is one of my problems in my swing. I tend to slice it because that's a steepener. I'm going to come more over the top. So if I need to get more around, right, deeper, that is a shallower. If you have longer wingspan, you tend to have a lot more swing path when you do that. That is one thing I see that happens because your hands are so far behind you. Even when you do get back here, we never want that forearm to be here. This forearm is always going to be on a slight angle. It's never going to be back. Find this, it's because of how people kind of turn the club open, fits it there. So. All right, so we're going to go through. I might just turn on this other video camera just so we can kind of see this. Just real quick. Hopefully it's not listening to my Bluetooth. So these are our checkpoints and things we want to work on at home. So number one, keep writing out your routine. If you're at the range, always use alignment sticks. I always find it funny. You go to tour event, everybody's got alignment sticks, and you go to a driving range, no one has sticks out on the ground. But really, things I want you to work on is going to be your sequencing. What do you find easier? Again, if you tend to fight something, are you fighting it, or is that what your body really wants to do? So working on like what's taking the club away. Is it more your hands? Do you feel more of it your torso and your core? Or do you feel it more in your lower body and your hips? Working on the baseline, again, you have your two options. If you have a laser, you can always do that. Or again, for here, I'm going to do my alignment stick. And again, like I said, if you do the alignment stick, that's drill. That's great. I always like to come back down to least impact. And you can kind of see when I do that, that left arm is in line with the club. Again, this is that position of every great champion instead of where we see most people, they try to flip it. So keeping that left fine wedge intact. And maintaining the radius of the swing. So again, so that good extensor action. So for our golf machine homework on that, we have our couple of different drills. So we're going to go through, again, we got our pinch the wrist with some extensor action. You do it with a rubber band. But we're going to get into hitting some golf balls. And when I go into hitting some golf balls, I always kind of call this the bunny slope because my buddy Will Robbins says if we were able to break our arm in golf like we could in skiing, we would never start with a driver. It'd be like going like a double black diamond. So we're going to start with basic stroke and acquired stroke. So what is basic stroke? Basic stroke is very simple. It's basic. But I'm going to take my grip and it's pretty much a chip shot. So it's going to go about 2 to 3 feet back, 2 to 3 feet through, but my left wrist is going to stay very stable and very flat. Now, again, sometimes you see people do this drill where they actually have an alignment stick and they're hitting their shot like this. That would be basic stroke. Again, trying to prevent my left wrist from breaking. So I would do 2 or 3 of these just to get a little feel for it. And again, it might be a what starts the backswing for you. If you tend to feel the hands kind of do it, that's fine. I still want to make sure that that left wrist is really flat when I'm finishing. And again, when I come through and I'm saying flat, my right wrist is bent, left wrist is flat. Okay. The big one is getting into the acquired stroke. And what is the acquired stroke? Acquired stroke is when we start to bring in the pivot. We're going to start making a longer backswing. I most of the time I tell people it's like what they would feel as a more like a punch shot. But I'm watching my trail forearm. So if I do this where you can kind of see my trail forearm, our trail forearm is parallel to the ground. But notice I'm not cocking my wrist. I'm keeping my left wrist super level, right? So it's not setting, not cocking, not doing anything there. So what's going to happen, again, this is another easy way to start figuring out what is your sequence pattern in the takeaway. Is it going to be more with your wrist set? Again, right wrist bend, horizontal set, turning through with my body. Is it going to be more with my shoulders? Or is it going to be with your hips? So again, I love this drill because you can always kind of come back to it. It kind of just brings us back to where we have our sequence, where we have balance. And what I can do with this drill is I can hit it where I can hit it 20, 30 yards, or I can go and I can accelerate it and I can hit it where it goes like 70 to 80 yards. Okay. So start to understand and like feel where you're pulling your energy from and power. You watch these guys on TV, they make these relatively short swings. There's a lot of power that they're generating. They don't have to like make these huge backswings to create energy. So where we start to use how we use the ground, which we're going to start talking about next week on the way down, again, like our pressure shift and weight shift and all that. But those are my 2 favorite drills. I'd probably give that to everybody. Number one, if you're coming to one of my clinics and golf schools, that's where we're going to start with, because I want to start to understand where my body is. Um, Working, I think, 8 tour events in the US Open. I never watched a tour player walk out and start making full swings. They always had again, masseuse, stretch, whatever they had before they came out. Their body was ready to go, but we want to find our sequence. We want to find how our body needs to be moving, where we are in space. Usually we have a lot going on, whether we have kids or coming from work, whatever it might be. We need to kind of get into that golf mode. But when I'm finishing with this swing, again, notice my club, the toe of the club is very vertical. It's not on an angle and it's not here. So if I do this, this is probably going to go left. Again, the golf ball likes to go, when using a big club to demonstrate this. The golf ball likes to go where the toe is finishing. So if I'm going here, it's probably going to go a little too left. This should have a little fall to the left, slight draw, and this one would fade. Right? So we call this actually an angled hinge. Good player would call that holding it off so that they can hit a fade. So going through, and I can master all those. I can go in here, come through. Again, I'm always looking for the club to be vertical to the ground, toe up. My arm should be very straight. Again, you see my right forearm is still parallel to the ground. I'm not breaking my wrist. And this is a challenge because a lot of people, again, they're trying to flip through. They're trying to twist it. They're trying to do stuff down at the bottom. It makes this position in the follow through really important. So if I can go through and I can get those, so toe up, arms extended. Again, I feel a little stretch there with that right hand kind of pushing out. And I got my right foot slightly coming off the ground. Again, I always like to go in and I'll push on the club for somebody and I want them to push out. Again, this is not that lead arm that's stretching this. This is where that right arm is driving out and kind of driving the thrust down the target line. And that laser will go right down the line. So hopefully that helps us. Again, those are some easy drills we can do. If you have a net at home, that's great to do that. I'm not too worried about direction. I'm just working on contact. Again, if you can get onto a range where you can see a divot, I always want to see a little pinch of a divot with that too. Hopefully going through and it should sound good, feel good. Should, again, have a little start to the right, curve left. Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to hit a draw, but most people want to. But we're going to go in. So let's take a break from the presentation here. So we're going to turn this other screen off for a second. And we're going to analyze a couple swings. So if you want your swing analyzed, you can definitely reach out to me. Because I want to apologize because we're going to do this here. Thanks for still watching. So if I go in here and we're going to telecast here, start podcast. Okay, so I'm going to go through here and you should be able to see, choose from a library. So these are two of my students that did this. Thank you, Ben and Trish, for uploading some swings and being open to having some critique done on national stage here. So pull all these up here. And that way I don't have to pull them back in again. All right. So what I would stress, again, I want to say when we're looking at this, if I can get this video to pull up. There we go. So this is Trish. So right away, again, like what most people would say is we're kind of crossing the plane. But again, if I'm looking at Trisha's grip here, for me, I want to say that we're working on our pivot. And again, you can kind of see how that club's crossing the plane. Now, if this ball goes out to the right, which it did, my guess is we don't want to be there. So like my I think what we want to try to get here, if I'm looking at this, Trish, is probably get a little bit, again, delay the hips a little bit, but keep the club on a good plane there. I wouldn't let it be parallel to your target or your toe line and your target line so it doesn't cross the plane. I think the one thing that when we were working on was trying to make sure that she was turning more. What happens is I find a lot of times when people figure out that this is bad, they start making their swing shorter to try to make sure that the club actually stays in this position. So you can kind of see it looks laid off, but my guess is she wouldn't be fully pivoted there. So making sure that we're going through, right? And then we got Ben. Thanks again, guys, for sending your stuff in. Appreciate it. Um, so Ben, we actually, I made a comment to him in his last lesson that we're letting the left heel lift again. Like I would tell you, all great champions let their left heel come up off the ground. We want to be careful with how much, and it's going to get pulled off the ground. So I think the one comment that I made for him was watching again, like how much he's lifting that, because you can see how much he's turning his torso. So I'd love to see a little bit more, like kind of like right in here, just let the arms finish that backswing personally. But I think if we can get through, again, we can see big knee drive, but he had to release it early for me because he had too much, he over rotated in his backswing. So we want to watch again the pivot, making sure Ben is a low side under golfer. You can see his right hand grip is a little stronger. So he's setting the club early. And usually it's parallel to the ground, right outside the right foot. That's what I kind of see. But the tendency for that side under golfer, they don't like to turn as much as he's turning. So I would say we probably want to try to watch that, bub. Let's see if I can go out of this one. So see, within that, or stop the broadcast. Yeah. So go through again. Want to thank everybody for signing on, watching. It's all going to go through. We have a 12-week program. So again, trying to go through, do all our full swing stuff, trying to talk about how our body's influencing some things, how the geometry of the golf swing with the golf machines background that I have is influencing some things as well. If you're interested in getting your swing looked at and diagnosed, there's plenty of options you can go through and check that out. I mean, it's one thing I love about this platform is being able to connect people, not just through this, but also being able to help them with their golf swings. If you don't live in Maryland or in the DC metro area, but hopefully everybody has a great new year. Again, by the time I see you on our next stream, I will have had a birthday, so I will be 1 year older. But have a great new year. And again, happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Hope everybody had a great time with their family. And definitely look forward to seeing you next week and talking about the downswing. I'm guessing if anybody has any questions, we can take questions right now. Hopefully, Jim, you got the screen all figured out. Sorry about that again. You're welcome. Thank you. Send in your swing next week. We'll take a look at it. All right, everybody. So if no one has questions, thank you again. Appreciate your time, and definitely look forward to helping everybody get better at playing golf, get those scores lower. Again, next week, our topic is going to be working on downswing and trying to create some more power, speed, and use the ground a little bit better. So we'll see you then.